Somewhere around 2:30 a.m., the number on my screen stopped meaning anything. Not because it was low, it was fine, but my chest still did that thing, that tight, quiet squeeze that says, if something breaks, you're done. Because if you've ever felt that, you already know the weirdest part of financial insecurity. It doesn't always show up when you're broke. Sometimes it shows up right after a win, a raise, a new client, a month where nothing went wrong. And instead of relief, you feel watched, like life is waiting for you to get comfortable so it can pull the rug. I used to think that feeling was just anxiety, like, okay, I'm just wired wrong. Then I started noticing a pattern. The people who looked the most stable on paper, they were often the most fragile in real life. And the people who didn't earn the most somehow slept better. That gap bothered me, so I chased it. Not with spreadsheets at first, with moments. The tiny moments where you realize you're not safe, you're just on a leash. Let's talk about money. Here's the normal life most people live in. You wake up, you check your phone, you do that quick mental math before you even sit up. What bills hit this week? What's on auto pay? How many days until payday? I did it for years. Brushing my teeth, thinking about a payment due on the 19th, like my brain couldn't fully relax until the calendar said I was allowed. That's the world most people call normal. Stable job, stable income, stable routine, and a silent discomfort you can't name. Because from the outside, you look fine, so you feel dramatic for not feeling fine. That's the first trap. When you can't justify your fear, you start hiding it, even from yourself. Then something small happens. Not a disaster, something stupid.
Your car makes a sound it shouldn't make. Your boss changes their tone in a meeting. Your landlord mentions market rates. And your stomach drops like you're 14 again. I remember standing in a grocery store, looking at eggs and chicken, and catching myself doing the thing I used to do when I had no money, adding it up in my head like it was a survival test. I had money that month. I still did it. That's when I realized security isn't a number, it's a nervous system state. And mine didn't believe me. So you do what everyone does. You set a goal. If I can just make X, I'll feel safe. I said that sentence in 3 different income brackets. Every time I hit the number, the finish line moved. Not because I was greedy, because life expands, quietly, like fog. A better apartment because I deserve it now. A nicer car because reliable transportation matters. More little upgrades that feel harmless. And suddenly, your new income isn't freedom. It's fuel for a bigger machine. That's the second trap. You don't get more secure, you just get more expensive. At this point, most people refuse the real journey. They tell themselves, this is adulthood, this is responsibility. Everyone feels this. I told myself that too. I even got weirdly proud of the stress, like it proved I was handling life. But here's what surprised me. The more I tried to be responsible, the less control I had. Because responsibility, the way we're taught it, often means tie yourself to fixed obligations and call it maturity. And once you're tied to fixed obligations, you don't need a villain. You've already built the cage. My turning point wasn't dramatic. It was an email. Subject line, quick sync. Those 2 words have ruined more evenings than any overdraft fee. I remember reading it and instantly doing the math. Not the cash math, the life math. If I lose this income, what breaks first? How long until the fear becomes real? That night, I didn't even open my banking app. I opened my calendar. Because the truth was sitting there. My money wasn't the issue. My commitments were. My security depended on everything continuing exactly as planned. And life doesn't do exactly as planned. That's the threshold. Most people chase a bigger income, but what they really want is margin. Margin is the space between you and panic. It's the distance between something went wrong and I'm fine. And here's the uncomfortable part. You can have a high income and no margin. You can have a decent income and tons of margin. I didn't understand that until I saw it in my own behavior. I had an emergency fund, but I treated it like a museum. Look, don't touch. It wasn't a safety net. It was hostage money. Because I didn't trust that I could rebuild it if I used it. So every emergency still felt like a threat, even when I technically had the money. That's fragility. And fragility is what most people are feeling when they say, I don't feel secure. So what's the monster in this story? It's not debt most of the time. The monster is single-point failure. One paycheck, one client, one job title, one body that has to keep showing up every day, forever. When you live like that, you're not building security, you're leasing it. And leases get renewed or they don't. Once I saw that, the journey got messy. Because if the problem is single-point failure, the solution isn't just make more. The solution is to become hard to corner, hard to bully, hard to trap, hard to scare with one email. Security is when your options are hard to take away. Not impossible, just hard. And building hard to take away takes different moves than chasing income.
This is where most advice gets it wrong. People tell you to budget better, to save 20%, to cut coffee. Sure, fine. But I've watched people budget like monks and still feel trapped because their whole life still depends on one stream. They have discipline, they don't have optionality. And optionality is what your body is begging for when it won't relax. So I started running small experiments, not motivational, just tests. What happens if I lower my fixed costs even when I can afford them? What happens if I build a second income stream, even if it's tiny and embarrassing? What happens if I stop upgrading my lifestyle every time my income upgrades? The first thing I noticed was emotional. My breathing changed. I didn't wake up doing math as often. I stopped flinching at random emails. I could say no without hearing the panic voice scream, "You can't." Not because I became rich, because I became less fragile. And that's the real arc for you if you're the hero here. You're not chasing a number, you're chasing a state where your life can take a hit and still stand. So the trials aren't just financial, they're social, psychological, identity-based. Because the moment you start building margin, people notice, not always in a supportive way. Here's a trial nobody talks about. Your friends want you to keep up. Your family wants you to be stable. Your coworkers want you to stay in the same lane. And you want approval. So you buy what they buy. You commit to what they commit to. You lock in a lifestyle that makes you look successful while quietly draining your freedom. I did this. I said yes to things I didn't even want because it made me look like I was doing well. The cost wasn't the money. The cost was the dependency. Another trial, lifestyle inflation disguised as self-respect. This one is sneaky. I deserve nicer things. I'm raising my standards. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's a mask. I noticed I used standards as a way to avoid the discomfort of restraint. Restraint felt like going backward, so I called it growth and kept spending. The bill came later, not as debt, as fear. The reveal usually comes after a scare. A client ghosts you. A rent increase hits. A family member needs help. Something that forces you to see your stable life as a thin layer of paint. I had a month where 2 expenses hit back to back. Nothing wild, just perfectly timed. And I remember thinking, I'm not broke. Why does this feel like drowning? Because my system had no slack. No slack means everything feels like drowning. This is the moment where you stop blaming the world. Not because the world is fair, because blaming doesn't create options. You start asking different questions. What's making me fragile? What's my single point of failure? What am I calling security that's actually a chain? When I asked those questions honestly, one answer kept showing up. My fixed life was too big. The stuff that shows up every month, whether I'm tired, sick, inspired, or depressed. The stuff that requires my constant participation. That's the real enemy. I'm not going to pretend I'm immune to comfort. I still want the upgrade. I still feel that itch when I see someone living larger. But I learned one rule that changed everything for me. If it increases your fixed costs, it must also increase your options, or it's a trap. Most people do the opposite. They increase fixed costs and call it security. Then they wonder why they can't breathe. Now comes the new definition. Financial security is not how much you earn, it's how hard it is for life to remove your options. That's it. When your options are easy to remove, you feel insecure, even if you earn a lot. When your options are hard to remove, you feel calm, even if you earn less. That's why the feeling never arrives for most people. They keep measuring the wrong thing. So what do you actually do with this? Not a lecture, a return path. I'll give you 3 moves that helped me stop feeling like my income owned me. Each one has a trade-off people don't admit. First move, shrink the must. Not your whole life, just the part that says, I have to. I went through my monthly expenses and circled anything that would still exist if I lost energy for 2 months, if I got sick, if I just needed a break. And I cut the ones that were basically ego in disguise. The trade-off is you will feel behind for a while. Your brain will say, everyone else is upgrading. Why are you downgrading? But that discomfort is dependency leaving your body.
Second move, build a second stream before you need it. This is the one people avoid because it's humbling. When your second stream is small, it feels pointless, like you're playing pretend. I started with something that made me almost laugh. The money was tiny, but it changed my posture. Because the moment you have proof that money can come from somewhere else, your job stops feeling like your only oxygen. The trade-off? It costs time. It costs focus. You might be less excellent at your main thing for a season, but that's the price of optionality. Third move, set a margin rule that protects your nervous system. Most people save in a way that still leaves them anxious. They save, but they keep raising the standard of enough, so the safety net never feels like a net. I picked a margin number that meant one thing only. How many months can I make choices without begging my future self? Not survive miserably. Choices, dignity, breathing room. And I protected that margin like a boundary with someone who doesn't respect you. The trade-off? You'll say no to tempting upgrades, but you gain something better. You stop feeling like life can take you hostage. These moves don't make you look rich fast. They make you feel secure slowly. And the world rewards looking rich, so you'll feel friction. That friction is the old story trying to pull you back. But if a life makes you fragile, it's not security, it's performance. So if you've been waiting for the moment you finally feel secure, here's the truth. That moment won't arrive from earning more alone. It arrives when you build slack, a life that doesn't collapse if you have an off-season, a life where you can change your mind. Because that's what most people are really afraid of, not being broke, being exposed as someone who can't stop, can't slow down, can't take a hit. Start where you are. Pick one must and weaken it. Pick one second stream and plant it. Pick one margin rule and defend it. Not because you're trying to be perfect, because you're trying to become hard to corner, hard to scare, hard to control with one email. I'll end with the question that finally snapped me out of the illusion. What in your life feels like security, but is actually a chain you polish so it looks like success? Sit with it, because the moment you answer that honestly, you're already on the journey back. And this time, you return with something real. options.